With many people facing a conflict in the world in how people view different news stories, well, there's a lot of different headlines that are going on right now that really affect people in many different ways. And as we see that, there's many different headlines, like, for example, the killing of a CEO, the war in Gaza, and other issues like that. We can see that we can see that the news is portraying the world in many different ways. Well, there's one hidden well there's hidden headlines that come across the globe here in question, and one of those hidden headlines is the humanitarian crisis in Sudan. And well, this humanitarian crisis has been going on for a very long time. And as we can see that there, it's only going to cause further problems if people do not understand it, and if people can't even see it on a headline. So, when asked the question, is the humanitarian crisis in Sudan receiving enough international attention? I can answer with a no, for the following three main points of analysis, in which first, we're going to be looking on how it is still an issue, second, how it is a major conflict, and third, how action is needed. So, when looking at International Rescue Committee, which explains that 10% globally in humanitarian aid from Sudan. 10%. That is a lot of how people need global aid, and we can see here that it's only going to cause larger problems if it's this big and headlines are not covering it. So, on my first point of analysis, looking on how it's still an issue, well, the International Committee explains that 25.6 million in need, and it's only exacerbating with these political and economic instabilities. So we can see here that many factors like this economic instability and with this political instability, it really plays a factor, and it's only going to exacerbate this problem, and it's only going to get worse and worse. And as we can see that there, it's still an issue. It really is, because when we see that it's increasing, it's only going to cause major problems across Sudan. Juris News from 17 hours ago explains that the conflict it is making a headline of humanitarian needs, and it's only reaching unprecedented levels. So we can see that this conflict that is arising, it started in 2003, and it's only going to get worse and worse. And as we see that this long-term conflict and how it's going to get worse, and with these unprecedented levels, it really needs to be the main focus in today's world. On my second point of analysis, looking into how it is a major conflict, first, we show you that France in November of 2024, that Sudan's biggest humanitarian crisis, it's Sudan's biggest humanitarian crisis ever recorded. We can see that from the International Committee explains, and it shows with 30.4 million affected. Now we can see that from my last card, which explains in October, which was 25 million. Well, this is 30 million in November. In 1 month, we can see that in 1 month, 5 million have been affected. If we see that, then we can see how much it's going to escalate. The BMJ in 9 days ago explains that the World Statistics explains in 2024 that ranking out of every country with the humanitarian crisis, Sudan is number 2, and it's an escalatory humanitarian crisis. Now, if we can see that ranked out of all these different countries, well, they have humanitarian crisis, but it only comes and go. And we see this with Sudan. And when we see with Sudan, it is a whole lot worse because it's still a long-term conflict. It's only going to get worse and worse. On my third and final point of analysis, looking into how action is needed, UN News, November 2024, explains that UN General Assembly explained that we must have collective actions to deal with this issue. Now, this is a large community of many countries. It's a huge organization. And the fact that they see this problem, we must have this, it only increases the incentives to actually stop it. And with people not even knowing the problem or not even taking the action for the problem, we can see here that the largest communities are taking it for a international concern. Carita in December of 2024 explains that Carita's international call for makes a call for increased support for Sudan's humanitarian aid. So basically, Carita is another huge community made up of 200 countries. Now we can see that there 2 different communities have brought to this issue. And if we can see that these large communities are trying to find problems to find this issue, even if it's hidden under these news stories, it is still a major problem in today's world. Now, when asked the question, is the humanitarian crisis in Sudan receiving enough international attention? I had to answer with the no for the following 3 main points of analysis, in which first, we looked how it's still an issue, second, how it's a major conflict, and third, how action is needed. Now, when looking back and how these news stories affect, well, this is a really hidden one, but it still shows how big this conflict will be.